I'm Dave, joined by Tamoor Hussain, and this is our video review for Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. The Soulsborne world is a world that means a hell of a lot to a hell of a lot of people. It's really meaningful to me, and I know it's really meaningful to you. So Sekiro being an extension of that, how did it feel to finally play this game?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm incredibly obsessed with From Software's games and their worlds. You know, I've completed the Souls games multiple times, except for Dark Souls 2, not you. Bloodborne is a game that I've platinumed. I fall asleep almost weekly to like lore videos. Shout out to Vati and Dave Control Live. So they are very, very close to me and my heart. And so Sekiro was this kind of exciting experience, but also made me quite nervous because this is one of the first games that has been made at From Software since Miyazaki became president, and he's made it very clear that he wants to do something different and step away from the traditional Souls thing that they're known for. So it was also quite a nervous experience for me because I was like, this is a developer I really love, and if I don't like this, that's another 3 to 4 years before I'll get something out of them. So it was also an exciting opportunity to see what they can do beyond that Souls format, and I'm pleased to say that it was quite spectacular.
It was banging. I'm having such an exciting time. The differences that it's brought to the Dark Souls kind of formula, while it's recognizable to obviously long-time fans like us, I think that it's also bringing enough new stuff that it's going to be exciting for new players to get into. One of the most defining things for all of these games is the combat, especially how different the Dark Souls to Bloodborne is. It's then extremely different from the jump to Sekiro. So tell us, in detail how the combat has kind of changed.
Yeah, so in my review, which is available now on GameSpot.com, my written review, I kind of open it by talking about how it's a familiar experience, and I think that is very much the case. Like, the building blocks of the combat are very, very familiar, and to someone who's like not super played a lot of Sekiro, if you just show them a video, they'll say it looks the same, but what it kind of wants from you is to play on its terms more. The previous games kind of gave you this freedom to kind of behave in the way you want. The Souls games, for example, meant you could either be like a magician type character, or you could, be a warrior style, or, dexterity, strength, that kind of stuff. And Bloodborne had the kind of like a little more of a push where it wanted you to be aggressive, but it gave you loads of weapons and styles, and you can still have like a hit and run style kind of approach to it. Whereas Sekiro has a defined way to play it. It's built around the imagery of swords clashing, and that you have to keep in mind. That's what it wants from you. It wants to put you in a situation where you are taking your fight to the player, to the other enemy, and kind of clashing swords and then using the opportunity to counter their moves and then strike with a death blow. And I think because of that, the challenge in the game for people like me and you and the many, many other Souls fans out there is kind of unlearning the mentality that we've built up.
Yeah, that muscle memory that you have.
Yeah.
Because it is recognizable when you pick up the game as it being, part of the kind of Soulsborne world. Instantly I was moved to kind of hold guard, or I was dodging or jumping away far too much, and that's just not the way that Sekiro is built.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that, like, it's not impossible with that mentality, because the normal enemies, they're a little more lenient. You can get away with that. The hit and run style, you can do that there. But the thing is, if you're doing that too much, you're not learning what the game wants from you. You're not training yourself to kind of like it's all built around a stat called posture, and that is basically the ability to not be staggered by an attack. And the way you wear that down in an enemy is you counter their attack as they're hitting. And it's a very specific timing, and that kind of breaks posture eventually and leads to a death blow, which is an instant strike, quick, fast flourish. To build up the kind of like the skills to do that, you need to practice it a lot. And if you don't do that and you still stick to the Dark Souls, Bloodborne style mentality, when you reach a mini boss or a boss, they are going to wipe the floor with you for hours and hours and hours on end. And I know that because it happened to me. Like, I had like a mixed approach when I came into the game. Like, there were some enemies where I do that with, but I clearly wasn't throwing myself into combat. And then I got to a boss that literally took me 6 hours. And it was because I wasn't willing to commit to the way it wants me to play and the vision that From Software had for the combat. once I kind of really I took one death really, really hard, and it just like really like it made me flip a switch, and I was like, I'm sick of this kind of like really long drawn out battle where I'm like pulling away and like very carefully measured
waiting for those very rare openings.
And I just went in, like I just got up and ran straight at the guy, and it was just parry, 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 and within 6 minutes I was done.
That's what I've been really loving about Sekiro so far. It really plays to the player's confidence, and it has tools to reward that confidence. And the more confident you get with your combat, the more rewarding it becomes, and the more you can feel yourself getting better as your own confidence grows, which is a kind of formula that a lot of games struggle with. But Sekiro, some fights you really do feel like Master Badass Shinobi when you're parrying every single flurry and you're demolishing fights without a hit being taken.
Yeah, I think a lot of people speak to how challenging this game is, and it is difficult. Like, nailing the timing is difficult. Not being careful and getting yourself into skirmishes, big ones, can make it challenging. I think the greatest challenge in this game comes from it's like a mental challenge. Do you have the fortitude to stand back up, pick yourself back up, and go back into a fight? Because that's what these games are, and more so with Sekiro than any other game. It's about going into a fight, a tricky one, with the objective of learning something, like finding a new move or getting one step closer to learning that timing. And you have to accept that in the process of doing that, you will die. But when you come back, you'd be that just slightly a little more equipped to deal with it. And over time, you'll reach the point where you've downloaded this boss, you've figured them out, you know exactly how to approach it or this enemy. And when you do it, there's nothing like the satisfaction of it, because you've had that 6 hours or wherever it may be of getting stomped. And so when you defeat it, there's few feelings that I can kind of like compare to it. It's just completely overwhelming. And each time I've done it, it's been adrenaline and like heart pounding. I need to put the controller down. I need to step away. And as for my money, there's no other game out there that offers a similar experience.
Of course, going face to face and clashing swords with the enemy is just one method of getting through the world. Stealth is also a huge part of Sekiro, and that's something we haven't seen in a From Software game. Tell me what... You're a huge stealth game fan. This must have been super exciting for you.
As you know, and like I tweeted this as well, like this game feels like it was directly targeted at me, because like as well as the Souls games, my other major passion is stealth games, whether that's primarily the Metal Gear franchise, but Splinter Cell, Dishonored, any other stealth game, I'm out there. And so the fact that this game has stealth is so like satisfying for me and so enjoyable. And I think the stealth plays a really, really important part. So like the game has its origins in being a kind of spiritual successor to Tenchu, and you can see that there's, as well as having these kind of one-on-one battles, you have the opportunity to kind of like skulk around, and it has like very basic stealth mechanics that largely revolve around positioning yourself behind enemies or above enemies, using your grappling hook to move around, kind of like sneaking. You get into a crouch position and very slowly walking to position yourself so you can deliver death blows. That has kind of like twofold impact on the game itself. One, you're thinning out the crowd, because in most places there's a difficult enemy that you will inevitably go on to take on, and if there's other enemies about, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
So effectively, you're evening the odds against this one main enemy by thinning out the crowd.
And fighting hordes it can be a nightmare in Sekiro.
They don't stand around. They all come for you at the same time, and it's tricky to like land counters when multiple enemies are attacking you. It's doable, but it's very high failure rate. As well as thinning out the crowds, you get an experience that you can use to unlock new abilities and flesh out your character or kami, or you get money to buy stuff. Top of that, you're kind of filling up the bar that allows you to, or the kind of like energy that allows you to revive when you die. So that's one of the things that makes it slightly easier, but there are consequences to reviving reviving and dying, and kind of like the loop of it, which we won't get into because it's kind of spoilery.
The story of these games is something that's very precious to a lot of people, so we're going to keep this focus to the mechanics in the world, because so many people are just going to want to experience that for themselves.
Beyond the mechanical stuff, the stealth is really, really good for building that mental fortitude, almost giving you like a confidence boost,
Yeah.
because you're taking out a lot of enemies, so you feel good. It's sort of like an ego stroke almost, so you feel that a little more empowered to go towards an enemy and towards a boss. So there's this kind of like this balance, this ebb and flow between really tricky stuff and the stuff that's a little more your own pace, that you can dictate how you go into a fight. Of course, that fight that you inevitably go into is still difficult, but you've made it a little bit easier stuff and you feel a bit better about yourself. And also, you get to look at the world. And that world is very, very impressive.
Yeah, it's I think it's very much been designed with the tenets of Sekiro in mind. There's the verticality, the thoughts on exploration. I was saying to you before, playing Bloodborne and Dark Souls, there was always really a defined path or a defined couple of paths, but now the sensation of looking behind you, looking in like very small nooks and crannies. I know that was a thing in Dark Souls, but never was there so much attention paid to looking off the beaten track, looking up, looking around you, and seeing the potential of other avenues of attack and exploration.
Yeah, so like I said again in my review, which is up on the site, From Software, one of the main things that they praise for is their world construction, right? It's going into this world, this small area, playing through it, and going into another one and being like, oh, this actually fits into the previous one and the areas that I've come through. And then you very slowly build a larger picture of the entirety of Lordran, Drangleic, Yharnam, whatever it may be. But usually it can take a little while to see that bigger picture. In Sekiro, though, like, you arrive to an area and you can almost immediately see how the area folds in on itself. You can see the thoughtfulness that has gone into the construction almost immediately. Like, you're standing on top of a building, you'll see a path like that is kind of like threading itself in between the enemies, but off to the side you'll see like a tangle of tree branches that is just going around it, and then you can see just above the tangle of tree branches there's a roof, and if I jump onto that tree branch, I bet you at the end I'll be able to grapple hook onto the roof and it'll put me behind one of the enemies and I can backstab. And like that satisfaction of going around enemies and kind of like in between them and following the like twisting, turning paths and the folding paths to kind of like thin out the crowd and really explore the intricacies of each level is so like satisfying and rewarding from a stealth perspective, because it means like you're this ghost and you can be everywhere.
It almost feels like you're tricking the game.
Yeah.
Like the game's designed to make you want to do that, but then when you do all this exploration, you feel like you're the smart one. You fooled it.
Yeah, and that's on a micro level. Like, that's not to say the bigger stuff isn't there. Like on a wider view, taking a wider view, the areas do link back into each other. I had a moment where I was like 20 hours into the game, and at one point I went through an area and it brought me back to the starting area, and I realized that I could have come to this area at the very start of the game. There's nothing to prevent me to go there, and that was like a mind-blowing moment again, the kind that you have like we had when we were playing Dark Souls for the first time, and you get that kind of like that strength of world design is really, really apparent here, and it's such a interesting way to kind of make you place greater scrutiny on the world around you, and inevitably when you do that, you get to see how beautiful it is as well. Like, it's also a visually quite arresting
gorgeous,
world.
yeah.
It's stunning, yeah, and it's a little more grounded in reality than previous stuff, but that doesn't mean they don't have fun with it and they don't make it look interesting. There's like the natural beauty is there, but there's also some fantastical stuff as well that shows up a little later into the game, and that kind of like when you see that stuff, it almost lands harder because you're so used to seeing the normal things, that when something like a demon appears, you're like, what was that? That was so weird, and like it gets your heart racing. So the world is absolutely phenomenal, I think. It's
a game that's had a lot of questions about it, and we reached out on Twitter to ask for some of your questions. So we've got a few here. The first one from Joseph Yaden. Which do you think players will find more difficult, Sekiro or the Souls games?
I think it depends where you're coming from. Like, I think they're both difficult challenges. I think the thing that stands out about Souls is the difficulty is in almost being ambushed, and like it feels like jump scares in a movie. Yeah. A lot of ways, like that's what makes it really tricky. You have to be very careful and like methodical in how you move through. Whereas difficulty in Sekiro feels more mechanical. It feels more demanding on you as a player, and not exactly the game tricking you into being killed, like you know, having an enemy leap on you, or like an enemy that you've never faced before suddenly do a one-hit kill. This is like the enemies are there, you can see them, and the challenge is in one, working up the courage to go and fight them, two, actually keeping up with them and showing that you've got the skills to parry right and the strategy to back off and jump back in when you need to. I think they're two very different types of challenge and experience, even though they look quite similar. I think regardless of who you are and your experience level, Sekiro is going to be challenging. But I think, the same can be said of Dark Souls and Bloodborne too.
Similar thought from Christian Howarth. Am I safe going into Sekiro as a newcomer to From Software games?
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect point to pick up the game, and it's quite different from...
I almost think that's an advantage because of the whole muscle memory.
Yeah, because of the muscle memory thing, you're in a better position. Like, you still need to go in knowing that it's gonna be a tricky one. Like, it's gonna test you, and it's gonna test how willing you are to get through it. But one of the things that I really like about it is like the stealth aspect of it means that it's not completely overwhelming. Like, every part of Dark Souls and Bloodborne can be difficult. Like, every enemy is a threat, whereas because if you use stealth effectively, not all enemies are definitely going to kill you. Like, you can backstab your way and kind of, like we said, thin out the crowd and even the odds and feel good about doing that, and then take on a really challenging part of it. So it's almost like there's a stealth game in there that everyone can enjoy, but inevitably and eventually you'll have to play the From Software part of it, which is very, very difficult.
Valeriano M brings up the point of how many hours is it to beat the game? I know these games famously have a lot to do, but how many hours do you think you could sink into Sekiro and beat it?
It varies wildly. I know that Eric in the US finished it in about 25, but he brute forced a lot of it and got a very specific ending that caters to brute forcing it. But like I got to like 60 hours before reaching kind of the end game. And that a lot of that involved like the trial and error aspect of it, but I also am one of those people that goes back to areas just to speak to NPCs over again and explore. There's a lot of nooks and crannies in this game. I wouldn't describe it as a Metroidvania game, but like over time, once you get the grappling hook, you realize, I need to go back and look at this thing. And there's reasons to backtrack and see if anything's changed, because sometimes you'll go there and be like, oh, this enemy wasn't here before, and if I kill him, I can get one of these upgrade beads. And so I spend a lot of time going back and forth. I think if you just want to complete it, I think the average playthrough will be around 40 hours. But if you're like a completionist or you want to soak up the scenery and really figure things out, I think between 60 and 80.
Before we let everyone watching this actually go play the game, do you have any final thoughts on Sekiro?
I really, really adore it. It has been a difficult game to play, especially one for review, because deadlines are not a good thing, not a good stress on top of all the difficulty of an
6-hour boss fight.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I absolutely adore it, and I'm already obsessed with it. Like I said, I'm looking forward to people like Varty and Dave and like various other the Dark Souls community rallying around it to figure it out, because there's a lot to figure out there. And yeah, just play it. It's fantastic.
But if you want to read the full review, that's on GameSpot.com right now. And if you're struggling in Sekiro, we have about 1 trillion guides already up, so make sure you head to GameSpot to actually, learn a thing or two, hopefully, because I know for a fact I wouldn't have been able to beat the Blazing Bull if it wasn't for those guides. And if you have any other questions about Sekiro, you can find us on Twitter @IrregularDave, or
I'm @TomorH.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.